Please, welcome. When I see a couple kissing, believing they love one another, believing they will endure, whispering into each other's ear in the name of an instinct to which they give lofty names. When I see them caressing one another with that embarrassing avidness, that expectation of discovering something crucial in the other's skin, when I see their mouths becoming entangled, the exchange of tongues, their freshly showered hair, their unruly hands, fabric rubbing and lifting up like the most sordid of curtains, the anxious stick of knees bouncing like springs, cheap beds in one-night hotels they will later remember as palaces. When I see two fools expressing their desire with impunity in broad daylight, as though I weren't watching them, it's not merely envy I feel. I also pity them. I pity their rotten future. And I get up and ask for the bill, and I smile at them askance, as though I had returned from a war which the two of them have no idea is about to commence. This peaceful woman is Elena. Let me introduce to her. She's the main character of this book. She's writing a diary in which she says a few things that we never dare to say to the other people. It's a book very much focused on two, I would call them gaps in traditional narrative. The first gap is the female character in a traditional rose story, which turns out to be quite a male tradition. So I was interested in beginning with Ulysses and going on with Penelope. And the second gap is linked with the caregiving. When you tell a story about illness, very often the main character is the ill person. Let's say Tolstoy, Ivan Ilyich. But not many people or not many narrators remember the importance of the caregiver. And the caregivers themselves don't allow themselves to tell their story, as if they weren't allowed to complain, to express their conflicts, their doubts, just because they are caring for someone else. So this is a pretty conflicted and politically incorrect character, and I learned a lot, to be honest. Talking on her behalf, I myself had to take care of my father and then my mother, and interestingly and painfully enough, the one who was the caregiver was the ill one later. My father saved his life, and my mother, who was supposed to be the strong character, the one who was supporting the other, was the ill person and died, sadly, very young. So this left me thinking of the weaknesses of the strong character in families and books. This is another excerpt of this book, which is like a tragic comic book. I would love to find the page. That would be so helpful. I was thinking of a particular excerpt in which she talks about, here. I hadn't folded the page, that's why. What happens with your own body when your beloved body changes or disappears? I find that almost nobody talks about this. I didn't talk about this when I was taking care of my parents. So I was curious what could really happen when you lose someone and you have to go back to bed. When someone you slept with dies, you begin to doubt their body and yours. The once touched body withdraws from the hypothesis of a rencounter. It becomes unverifiable, may not have existed. Your own body loses substance. Your muscles fill with vapor. They don't know what it was they were clutching. When someone with whom you have slept dies, you never sleep in the same way again. Your body doesn't let itself go when it is in bed. Your arms and legs open as though clinging to the rime of a well, trying not to fall in. It insists on waking up earlier, on making sure at least it possesses itself. When someone with whom you have slept dies, the caresses you gave their skin change direction. They go from relieved presence to posthumous experience. There is a hint of salvation and a hint of violation about imagining that skin now. A posteriori necrophilia. The beauty that was once with us remains stuck to us, as does its fear, its hurts. That's a very faint and beautiful pattern. Thank you very much. I liked it very much. Well, Elena indeed talks about death, but obviously talks about sex. Both edges of the body. So I remember an essay by a sociologist, a British sociologist. He was Geoffrey Gorer. Geoffrey Gorer was the very first one on researching the grief and doing interviews, surveys with people who had lost people. They are people. And he found a fascinating conclusion that I found very useful for this character, for Elena. He said, clumsily translated into English, which is interesting because he was actually British. But I read it in French, which makes the thing. So this won't be the best of grammars, but more or less, he said that prudery, you say, when you're prudish? Prudery? The prudery that was repressing sexual desire in 19th century hadn't disappeared, but just moved to the grief in the 20th century. While the illness went out from the houses and went into the hospitals. So sexual desire and grief are two very deep phenomenon, I don't know, which take place with, secretly, that's what he said. Both things happen secretly and with more or less guilt. So I found this extremely interesting, and I thought it was like the key for this character. So this is luckily the sex part. She's talking about her lover. Ezekiel's power can be appreciated when you see him naked. He has to be seen in movement, gesticulating, approaching, assaulting. His physique is a refutation of the Platonic. He is audacious, not muscular, intense, not athletic. What is irresistible is his conviction, which encourages me to overlook my own defects. This is essential when in bed with a man. Not what I see in his body, but what he can make me see in mine. When I am with Ezekiel, I adore myself. I concentrate on our actions, and our actions are all my God. I remember early on, when we were very young, feeling intimidated by Mario, her husband. His robustness, his symmetry. I had never been confronted by such beautiful nude. But in bed, I couldn't give myself fully. I didn't find disorder. It was like embracing the treasure chest and being unable to open it. I hoped that things would improve by living together, and they did improve, but not very much. Now I think that deep down, because it seemed to me his body was more admirable than mine, I was constantly wriggling away, choosing my best side, half posing. With Ezekiel, I allowed myself to be plain, vulgar, ugly, excitingly ugly. And the other thing Elena does is reading. She finds that there are two pleasures we could vaguely confront to death, and those two pleasures are sex and reading, and links between both things. Because both things are about to get to know yourself and to be someone else at the same time. This balance between to find yourself and to behave like someone else. So that's a thing that fiction and sex have in common, among other things. You shouldn't underline other people. That's not very well mannered. But she's an underliner. She doesn't merely read books, but she has conversations with them. She agrees, disagrees, she takes notes on the margins of her books. And while the book goes on, she develops a sort of anthology on desire, grief, and loss. He has this personal, intimate library that in a way is the other voice she needs to have a proper conversation about everything we don't dare to say about this subject. So I would like to share with you a very short excerpt in which she talks about reading and writing. And now we will end with this voice. How Mario would have loved this collection of letters between Chekhov and the actress Olga Nieper, concerts at a distance. He always traveling, she always in the theater, both speaking of future encounters, until their correspondence is interrupted. And toward the end, suddenly, like an improvisation amid an empty stage, she starts to write to her deceased husband. So, as I write, she says to herself, she says to him, I feel you are awaiting my letter. If death interrupts all dialogues, it is only natural to write posthumous letters. Letters to the one who isn't there, because he isn't, so that he is. Maybe this is what all writing is. Do you agree? I have such a lot to tell you, and even a lot to ask you. Let's say you said yes. And the one who he isn't is ringing. And please switch off your phones if you can, because we're just about to take off. These very, very short remarks she does about reading, that I feel we always have felt like this when reading a book that sort of says where we were searching, and we don't know, we were looking forward to say this until we read it. Very much the same as when we write. We don't write what we think, we write in order to think or feel. So reading and writing are able to invent our feelings, not only reproducing them. I wonder whether, perhaps without realizing it, we seek out the books we need to read, or whether books themselves, which are intelligent entities, detect their readers and catch their eye. In the end, every book is the I-Ching. You pick it up, open it, and there it is. There you are. When a book tells me something I was trying to say, I feel the right to appropriate its words, as if they had once belonged to me and I were taking them back. So this is Elena. Very different voice is 10 years old Lito, her son, who is having such a lot of fun with his father in a truck. For the father, this should be perhaps the last journey, but for his son, this is the very first important journey. And I think that parenthood is very much about that. Everything is the first and the same time perhaps the last thing. And that makes it so moving to raise a child. You're working on the future of that being, but secretly you're working on the memory of that being, trying to join that memory. So it's mostly a science fiction event, having a child. You're working on a memory for the future, which I find very interesting and literary and narrative and difficult and expensive. So this is Leto. I will read 2 excerpts from this little boy. Maybe, well, I don't know if we have time. Well, can I read 2 excerpts from this voice? Okay, so the first one is here, just a page, and the second one here. I will tell you now about the weather, not this one, and cheap hotels. Now I'm Leto. I'm glad to see you. We arrive at Veracruz de los Aros and then it happens again. The sky clouds over, all at once. First I thought it was a fluke. No way. I've done loads of tests and it works. If I concentrate really hard, the weather changes. I don't know who has the power, Pedro or me. But it's true. Maybe that's why they gave the truck that name. Wasn't he the same who carried around the keys of heaven? I was worried that Dad might laugh at me and all that. I know him so well. I'm glad he takes me much more seriously now. That's the good thing about being 10 and sharing a truck. So I told him about my discovery, that tested it too, and he saw it was true. It depends on my mood. If everything's okay, it's sunny. If I get bored, it clouds over a bit. When I'm restless, it gets windy. If I get angry and cry, it rains. The other day, for instance, Dad was furious because I stuck my arms out of the window. It scares me when Dad bawls at me like that. At that night there was lightning. Of course, you have to be patient. The sky won't change as soon as I think of it. It's like Dad says. You have to drive a long way to travel a short distance. But if I keep it up, eventually it happens. Like meal times. And later on, in extremely cheap and suspicious hotel, in which the father is so embarrassed to stop. The girl asks us not to open the blinds in the room because they are stuck. Besides, she winks, with this wink it's best you don't even try. After she winks, her top eyelashes come off and get tangled in her bottom eyelashes. I want to tell her, but I'm too shy. Dad whispers in my ear, "Gorilla from Manila. There's good news and bad. The good news is they have internet. The bad news is it isn't working." We go upstairs to put our things in our room. The carpet smells of cigarettes. It has holes bigger than my feet. You could play mini golf on it. Leto, Dad says, looking at the carpet, "Whatever you do, don't walk around barefoot. And when you go to bed, take the quilt off first. Do you hear?" I spot 2 white towels on a chair. Well, more or less white. I sniff them, luckily they smell of soap. I open the bathroom door, there are only wire hangers and a safe. What a weird room. Dad goes into the hallway. I hear him talking to himself. "This is impossible," he mutters. "I told that bitch we wanted en suite." The word bitch always makes me giggle. I like it when Dad says it. It doesn't sound the same when my friends and I say it. Dad comes back in, he picks up the towels, he says to me, "At least there's hot water in the shower. Bring your clothes, son, and please do as I say, and don't touch anything, okay?" In the bar, I gobble down two cheeseburgers, a plate of French fries with a ton of hot sauce, and a scoop of ice cream covered in syrup. Dad only eats half his. He says he wants to lose some more weight. He takes an aspirin with a glass of water. Before he got the virus, he used to eat loads, and he loved going to restaurants. "What?" I laugh, my mouth full of ice cream. "So you didn't like your big fat belly? What about you, skinny chops?" He teases. "Are you sure you don't need another hamburger?" I don't know what time it is. I don't feel like going to bed yet. Traveling is tiring, but it wakes me up. Dad leaves the table. He goes over to the bar. He pays. He's looking at me very hard. I think that as soon as I finish my ice cream, we're going to have to go up to the room. Dad is coming back. He walks up to me. He lifts my head in his hands, and he suggests we stay and have a drink. A drink? Dad and me in a bar after dark. I can't believe it. It's totally awesome. I get up, I wipe the syrup off my mouth with my sleeve, I stand up very straight, and we walk together to the bar. Dad orders a whiskey. I ordered a Fanta with lots and lots of ice. Well, that was Lito, brave Lito, asking for a Fanta. And this is the father. I would read just one skirt of this voice because I would love for us to have a conversation. And in case you don't have more questions, we could try this harmful brick, which is a totally different book and totally different voices. And so now comes the advice. I feel a bit ridiculous. The ideal thing would be for you to observe me half your life and think, all right, let's salvage this and this from this misguided man who is my father, and let the devil take the rest. Too bad. We can't. We can't. Enjoy life, do you hear? It's hard work enjoying life. And have patience, not too much. And look after yourself as if you knew you won't always be young, even though you won't know it, and that's okay. And have plenty of sex on, do it for your sake, and my and even your mother's, lots of sex. And if you have children, have them late. And go to the beach in winter. In winter it's better, you'll see. My head hurts, yet I feel good. It's hard to explain. And go traveling on your own once in a while, and try not to fall in love all the time. And care about your looks, do you hear me? Men who don't care about their looks are afraid of being queer. And if you're queer, be yourself. In short, advice isn't much use. If you disagree with it, you don't listen. And if you already agree, you don't need it. Never trust advice on. Travel agents advise you to go places they've never been. You'll love me more when you're old. I thought of my father the moment we got down from the truck. Our true love for our parents is posthumous. Forgive me for that. I'm already proud of the things you're going to do. I love the way you count the time on your fingers when you set the alarm clock. Or do you think I don't see? You do it secretly under the covers, so I won't know you have difficulty working it out. I'm going to ask you a favor. Whatever happens, whatever age you are, don't stop counting the time on your fingers. Promise me, octopus. Those are some great voices. Thanks a lot.